What we're going to do is continue looking at piecewise functions. The equations that we're going to be looking at are not going to be linear. This time we're going to be looking at different types of equations. So we're going to take our insight into how to graph these equations that we've done before and turn them into a piecewise function. So the first one that I'm going to look at is our square root function. And in the back of my mind, I know that my square root function looks similar to that right there. So when I'm doing my table of values, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my domain, which is 1. And when I plug in a 1, 1 minus 1 is 0. And that, of course, is the first square root, 0. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. The next square root is I want a 1, so I'm going to plug in a 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1. Minus 1 is 0. The next square root that I know is 4. So how do I get a 4? I have to plug in a 5. So 5 minus 1 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph. I have at 1, negative 1, an open circle. Then I have 2, 0, and then I have 5, 1. So it's going to go a little bit past. So it's going to be right there. Now, for the next one, I have a cube root, and I know that a cube root is going to look like this. So I always want to have an idea of what our graph looks like. Once again, I'm going to use my table of values, and I'm going to start off with my 1. So when I plug in a 1, the cube root of 1 is 1 plus 2 is 3. The next one is I want a number less than 1, so I'm going to pick 0. Cube root of 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. And then what I want is a negative 1. So I plug in negative 1, and the cube root of negative 1 is negative 1, plus 2 is 1. So what I have is at 1 and 3, I have a closed circle. And then I have 0, 2, and I have negative 1 and 1. So my cube root is going to look like this. So the next one, what we have is a logarithm. So I'm going to look at the logarithm, and first thing that I always want to know about my logarithm is my vertical asymptote. And so my vertical asymptote is x is equal to negative 2. Now what I notice about that is it's actually not in the domain. So that's helpful to know. I'm going to plug in a negative 1. And when I plug in a negative 1, I have negative 1 plus 2, which is 1, and the log of 1 is always 0. The next number that I want for a logarithm is the base number. So what gives me a 2 is a 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. And when the bases are the same, it becomes 1. So I have negative 1 and 0, and that is a closed circle. And then I have 0 and 1. And so this right here is my logarithm. Normally it would be going right here, and it would be approaching the asymptote, but that is not in the domain, so I'm not going to put that. I'm just putting part of the logarithm. And then just as a reminder, my logarithm is going to look like that. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And what we're doing is we only have a part of it. So the part that we're going to be doing is just this part right here. That's why it looks a little weird. It almost looks like a square root function. Now for the next one, what we have is exponential, and the exponential has a horizontal asymptote. And our horizontal asymptote is going to be y is equal to 1. I'm going to start off with negative 1. And when I plug in a negative 1 plus 1 is 0. Anything to the 0 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Then I'm going to pick a negative 2. Negative 2 plus 1 is -1, that means I flip it, so it becomes a half. A half plus 1 is 1.5. Now I have my horizontal asymptote, so I know what it's going to look like. Notice that I'm stopping at the domain. I have -1 and 2, which is an open circle, and then I have -2 and 1.5. And notice, because of the asymptote, I know where it's going. It's approaching it. Once again, just as a visual, we know that our exponential is going to look something like that. So what we're doing is we're just taking the bottom part of it right here. So here what we have is we have another exponential. So that means we have a horizontal asymptote. And with our horizontal asymptote, we know that since there's no constant, it's going to be y is equal to 0. We're going to start with our domain, which is 0. 3 to the 0 is 1. Then I'm going to plug in a 1. 3 to the 1 is 3. So I have my horizontal asymptote, which is not very helpful because 0, 1 is an open circle right here. 1, 3 is right here, and it's heading up. Now for the next one, it's a square root. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with 0, and that gives me 4. 0 plus 4 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. Now, I'm not going to pick -1 because that gives me a 3, and I don't know the square root of 3. I'm not going to pick -2. -2 plus 4 is 2, and I don't know the square root of 2. But I am going to pick -3. -3 plus 4 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1. Then I'm going to plug in a -4. -4 plus 4 is 0. Square root of 0 is 0. Now remember, our square root function looks like this. What we're doing is we're going to the left, so we're only seeing this part of it. So there's no arrow, and not only is there no arrow, it's ending right there. So we have 0, 2, which is a closed circle. Then what we have is -3, 1, and we have -4, 0. So this right here is our graph. Letter D, we see it's another cube root. So in my mind, this is what it looks like. I start off with the 2, and 2 minus 1 is 1, and the cube root of 1 is 1. Now, this one's kind of tricky because the next cube root that I know is 8, and so I'm going to plug in a 9 because 9 minus 1 is 8. Cube root of 8 is 2. So this right here, what I'm going to do is I'm only going to use one point, and the other one is a guide of kind of telling me what it looks like. So it's kind of weird because we're just looking at the end of this. We're not looking at the middle of it. So when we're plotting it, what we have is 2, 1, which is an open circle. And then the next one is going to be 9, 2. So it's going up like this. Then what we have is a log. And when we're looking at our log, this is a 1/2, so it's kind of an inverse log. It's going to look more like this, and it's going to have our vertical asymptote. Our vertical asymptote is at 0. It's actually in the domain, so it's important to put the vertical asymptote. And we start at 2, and log of 1/2 of 2, those are inverses, so it's going to give us -1. Then the next one that we want is a 1, and the log of 1 is always 0. So we have 2, -1, which is a closed circle. We have 1 and 0, and it's going to go up like this.